I think from grade 5 or 6, I knew I wanted to be a member of parliament. And if you joined a political party throughout your life, you'll have been, well, but he was a member of this party or that party. It's like you've put on the Collingwood jumper or the Essendon jumper. It's tribal. Too many politicians want to be liked. It's something innate about them. They need and seek that validation. I'm not critical of it per se, but I just think the value, the currency of respect is much more desirable. It's the ultimate disrespect. I'll just entertain you and tell you what you want to hear and you'll like me.
Just had a wonderful conversation with Nick McGowan. He's currently the Shadow Minister for Environment and also the Shadow Minister for Fire Services in Victoria. This is a man who's incredibly passionate, brutally honest, and erudite, articulate. I know I'm gushing. It was one of the best podcasts that we've done so far. We talked about his time in the UN as a peacekeeper, his foray into politics at the ripe young age of 18, and his passion concerning the environment and what he can do as a politician in the here and now. This was fun, and he's definitely coming back for a part 2 and possibly a 3. So sit yourself down, strap yourself in, and prepare to be amazed and educated. But before you do, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Let's get stuck into it. I was just talking with Nick off camera about politics, in my view, is a bit of a thankless task, but he had an amazing answer for that really got me thinking. And that answer is, Nick.
Wow, you've set me up here now. What if I can't remember what the amazing answer? What was the amazing answer? I think, is it thankless?
Yeah.
There's always nuanced answers, right? And no one likes to hear that because everyone wants the black and white. They want the yes or the no. But the truth is it's both. You know, sometimes you'll get thanks and appreciation from someone you've helped, and that's awesome. They're the best days by far. And then other days it's the old adage, no good deed goes unpunished. And so perhaps it's not even good deeds. There are days and things you can do in weeks, maybe years, worst case, where you perhaps may feel that that it's not acknowledged. But I think my answer to you was that if that's what you've come into this for, that you want some sort of validation or acknowledgement or praise, then I'd suggest you get a different job. Yeah.
Wow.
Because I just think we've all got insecurities, and I'm not immune. But you're not here to serve, I hope, yourself. There's an element of that because by putting yourself forward, that's what you are doing. But I hope it's more about your community or leaving, the planet, the state, the community better off than it was before you came in. The same sort of approach I think I have for my own family. We were talking a while ago about that with my own children. I hope that they're smarter than I am, and that admittedly I've set the bar pretty low for them. So they don't have to achieve too much actually, but certainly academically. Well, that's probably harsh to myself too, but that's isn't that the role of every parent? Doesn't every parent want their children to be better than they were?
100%.
We project all the things that I like. I'm terrible at. I can't play a musical instrument. I'd love to, and maybe I'm sure I've got the capability of doing it. But I made sure all 3 of my children learned piano from before they could think. So when they grew up, it was just automatic. They didn't have to think about it. They know how to play piano, which was really more about me than it was about them, the poor things.
No, I think that teaching children piano, it's great. I mean, not only from a musical perspective, but left side, right side, all of the brain, exercising that brain, which needs constant exercise. Look, it's really interesting. Like, obviously...
And you know my children's names, of course. It's Billy Joel and Elton John. And
You're not joking, are you? No. Oh, that's a good one, actually.
Yeah, they're not that good.
No. But, I mean, coming back to the actual, this is your profession. And obviously, when someone picks a profession...
Profession's a strong word, but go on.
Yeah, okay. It's your trade. There you go. You want self-satisfaction. You want to be able to do your job well, and there's a personal aspect to that, of course. Like, there has to be.
I think, you want to achieve something, but there's so many different ways you can go about that. I was talking yesterday to a lady who will replace me, literally at the next election in 7 months' time, she'll take the position I'm now holding because I'm in the upper house and she's already been selected. And I said to her, something I grappled with, certainly in the first months and I would say 2 years, it's a bit like any learning curve. After 2 years in a new job, you sort of start to master whatever it is you're doing, I hope.
Yeah.
Depends on its complexity. But I said to her, this job can take on so many forms. It's not as like we're a bus driver, you get bus, you drive the bus, you know the route. This job can take so many forms that you can have your wheels spinning and not achieving anything. And you've got to sort that out for yourself. How do you achieve? How do you achieve within the context of a team as well? Because, it's a unique team environment. It's not an environment or a team that necessarily always champions a player that stands out necessarily. Sometimes maybe, but in politics as a generalisation, envy kills. So particularly internally. So you've got to start, and I'm projecting here, I'm talking about myself in some part, because you've got to find how you can find your place in that team. And there's, that's using your own wits, your own reflection too, to see where perhaps you are cocking it up and you could do better and you've let yourself down or you've behaved in a way. Sometimes just little things, just interactions with colleagues, how you can do that better. You're forced to sort of constantly question what you can do better to make sure that you're getting the outcome you need. And if you're not getting the outcomes you need, that's a pretty good sign that you're not doing something right.
Oh, that's really interesting. How do you balance the fact, and you just said this, and I want to ask another question, how you know that this person's been pre-selected and your role is being, it's been passed to her.
I've been shunted, that's right.
You've been shunted.
Yep.
So
it's my choice.
It's your choice.
Yeah.
But sometimes that can happen without your say-so. And as you said, you're 2 years in a role, you get to know the role. You get to know that particular subject matter. And then suddenly they go, no, you're somewhere else now. And you go, hang on, now I have to learn a whole new thing. How do you sort of balance that? How do you... Yeah, sorry, I'm not being very...
That's okay. No, I know.
articulate here.
I think I know where you're going.
Yeah.
I think it's for me, I think, in the same way I have people with the fight or flight response, I think people either resist change or embrace it. And I tend to be somebody who's not afraid of change and I'm happy to embrace it. And that's probably a reflection upon the life I've led, I think. So if someone said to me, I had to quit my job and move my house tomorrow, that wouldn't faze me. I'd be like, okay, so where are we going? So I think that helps. For me, in this profession, it helps a lot because the truth is in 7 months there is an election and I don't know the public don't fully think about it, nor should they necessarily. But if I lose, then I'm unemployed. I've got to find a job. That's it. It's that stark. The next day, you're unemployed. You've got to find a job. You've got to pay the mortgage like everyone else. If you're political, your currency is probably less than other people because you've belonged to either Collingwood or Essendon, whichever poison you want to take it yourself. So that has consequences, real life consequences for the way people perceive you, whether they think you're appropriate for jobs based on your political allegiance. It's a whole nother world. I've had that my whole life.
But there are a lot of politicians who, and I'll be careful, who have feathered their nest for the private sector because they know that the political life is finite, like you just said. And at the end of the day, you can't sort of blame someone for that because their family, they and their family comes before my family. And that's how it should be. That doesn't mean you're a complete and utter bastard and you're not thinking about the community as a whole. But at the end of the day, blood is blood.
I think we've had examples federally more so than state.
Yeah.
There are some state too where after members cease, particularly when you're in government, in opposition, it's all downside. There's very little you can do to assist someone when they lose in opposition and they go on to other life. The stories that I'm certainly more familiar with in opposition are those stories where someone loses and they really, it's not, if they hadn't had a midlife crisis, they're about to have one because it's existential in so many ways. It forces them to either go back to what they used to do before, do a completely new career or just try and scramble to make ends meet. When you're in government and you stay in government, it's very different because you have a government there that can look to appoint you to a board to use your expertise. On one hand, that's great because you do have certain expertise, you have a skill set, so I don't object to that.
Yep.
There have been instances where I think when that knowledge, particularly with ministers more so, when ministers use that knowledge to their own advantage, personally I'd have some sort of exclusion. I'd think, and it's federal more than state, because federal is more internationally attractive.
Yes.
There are people who've made a lot of money using what they've had access to. And I don't know, I do have a problem with that. I think there should be an embargo period where you just, that's the price you pay. You don't have to do this job. Like, we put our hands up for it. So
it's a hard one though.
No, it's not. If you're going to bitch and moan about the pay, then this isn't the job for you. Like, this is more that, you know, we get paid well. We choose to be here. I don't think we can then, you know, cry foul that, oh, I can't use all this expertise to earn gazillions from some corporate who's prepared to pay me.
Wow.
You know, I don't buy that. I don't think the public buy it either.
They don't?
No, rightly so. I'd be tough on it.
I'm digesting your brutal honesty, and you are right. Now, for the people who don't know, what is your, I got to get the wording right, portfolio or shadow portfolio at the moment, right at this point in time?
Right at this point in time. So I'm a state member of the Victorian Parliament in the upper house. So we've got the two chambers, upper house, lower house. In addition to being a member of Parliament, I'm also the shadow minister for Fire Rescue Victoria. So that's a very specific, just to professional firefighters who work for Fire Rescue Victoria. There's another number of other categories like corporate staff. They're not firefighters per se, but they obviously support the firefighters and the work they do. And then in addition to that, I have the environment as a shadow portfolio. So that's the space that's certainly, in terms of the budget, they're both actually quite large. You know, we have something in the order of 4,000 firefighters. So both of them have a large impact.
And so this doesn't, as you meant, this doesn't cover the CFA, etc.
No,
that's a separate body.
CFA, 000, some of the other aspects of emergency services are with another shadow minister.
Okay.
I was very keen to have Fire Rescue Victoria is with me because of bit of experience. I'd seen my own party. You know, I've been around long enough in politics to see us go from government to opposition. I've worked in all of them.
Wow.
For all of them. And I'd seen, you try, as you get older, you try not to repeat patterns that are destructive. And I'd seen my own party pick off first responders. And when I say pick off, they took issue with needless fights, whether it be the police first, ambos later, fireys, police ambo, you know, this sort of pattern of behaviour from my side of politics, which I just was aghast at. At the end of the day, I've immense admiration for all of those professions, and I committed to myself, if ever I got elected to be a member of Parliament, I would do my darnest to make sure our party didn't do the same stupidity, and that we actually reached out to and tried to understand and not make those mistakes. So when I first got elected, one of the first things I did was I called Danny Hill, Wayne Gatt and Peter Marshall, and they're all the union representatives of each of those workforces, to say exactly that. And that, you know, I'm a Lib, proudly so. I understand our track record's not great, and I'm hell-bent to make sure that for whatever one person can contribute, then I certainly will be.
Wow. Diplomacy. How is that something that you have to learn when you become a politician, or is it are some people more naturally diplomatic than others? It's the whole, I ask this question to each of my guests, nature and nurture.
Oh, it depends who you're talking to, doesn't it?
I'm talking to you.
You know, you're talking to me.
Yeah, I'm talking to you.
For me, I have to learn it more and adapt it more. I mean, I have through observation, and I've been exposed to that very luckily through my work with the United Nations, and that's been an asset to me. I sometimes am running counter to my own intuition. I'm more of a fighter than a flighter, so if you're going to say something silly, then I might retort back. And even now, you know, I've got to bite my tongue more often. There's a value in people knowing where you stand. And I was thinking about this morning, actually, before I left my house. In a personal construct, somebody probably knew where I was going to come at with an issue because I'm not shy about saying what my position is. And that has an advantage. People can have stability, they can have certainty. And I think if you stay true to it, if you've got a sound moral compass, then I think that does provide reliability. But there's no doubt that from time to time, we all react emotionally to things. And I'm always working on trying to act less emotionally. And more with the old head first and be considered. When I'm more disciplined, I can certainly do it with good effect. When I'm more relaxed, perhaps less so. We all have our moments.
Well, that's the thing. That's the personality thing.
Yeah.
When it comes to the constituents,
Yeah.
what's more important, gaining their respect, then their trust, or gaining their trust, then their respect? Or are they both concepts tied into one?
It's similar to what you're saying. I've counseled politicians I've worked for before, because I've worked for numerous members of parliament. In politics, and I suppose that translates to work with constituents, in politics, the two of the currencies are like and respect. And like for me has little value compared to respect. You know, too many politicians want to be liked. It's something innate about them. They need and seek that validation. I'm not critical of it per se, but I just think the value, the currency of respect is much more desirable, because it means that you're more likely to actually achieve something for someone. And if that's the purpose, certainly when you're dealing with your own constituency and people locally, then respect will take you along much further and achieve much more than just being liked.
I agree.
Being liked is the easiest thing in the world, right? You just tell people what they want to hear. I've never been that sort of person. It irritates me. Like we're doing a dance that's just wasting someone's time, actually. And I'm not interested in doing that. I'm not interested in wasting my own time, let alone theirs.
It's the most valuable resource, isn't it? At the end of the day,
time.
As I tell my kids all the
really
time,
is.
Can't buy more of that.
It's the ultimate disrespect. I'll just entertain you and tell you what you want to hear, and you'll like me. I'm not the least bit interested in that.
What about the trust side of things? That's great. What about the trust side of things? When does trust enter the picture? Like, if you're, your constituents, when they start to trust you, is that after the respect?
I think trust is part of that building block to respect, right? Because without, I suppose the simple things hold true. Do as you say you will do. And that's hard sometimes. You know, we've all got great intentions, and I'm one person, and I have contact with a lot of constituents all the time. And sometimes one will slip through the cracks, and there's nothing more embarrassing than somebody coming to you 6 months later or a year later and going, "Oh, you never got back to me," and then you just, you're angry with yourself, or disappointed, not angry, disappointed with yourself. Like that's the human condition, that you can't do everything all the time perfectly, but simply following through and doing what you will say you will do. And I think a greater value than that is just consistently chipping away at the problem. I don't think people expect, in my experience, you to fix it immediately. That's great if you can. But unfortunately, my own experience is that most things take demonstrably more time than I would like. But I've always innately been someone who just keeps chipping away at something. I'll just keep chipping away at it until I get what I want. And, being a member of Parliament's an illustration of that. I'd stood so many times, it was almost a running joke. I think the newspaper quoting at one point, the Perennial candidate.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't take it to heart.
No.
They were right.
No,
they were right.
No.
You got to be able to laugh at yourself, right? It's like, yeah, that's true. But you've also got to know full well, one, you've got to have a sense of your own destiny. I think that's helpful. But two, or your own fate. Two, you've got to understand that those overnight successes are not overnight. Even if it's some young kid who's top of the pops and is a rock star, 21. The truth is, they've probably been, singing their heart out since they were 6.
Yeah,
and
exactly. Doing the grind, doing the hard work.
Yeah.
Do you think, and I'm not talking about politics particularly, I'm talking about everything we do. Is it all about the effort we put in? Like, if you're a toilet cleaner, be the best toilet cleaner you can. Put effort in.
Yeah. Hard work. There's no substitute for hard work.
It is that, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's an unattractive answer for most people. For any people, young, old, it's hard work. It's like there's no shortcut.
And there isn't. And this is the thing, because when you're young, you tend to want to, and I'll use the analogy of a ladder, jump a few rungs. And then as you get older, hopefully, you get a bit wiser. Not always. You go, no, I got to learn this, and then I learn this to do this, and I can go there. As opposed to, hey, I want to get up the top. I know I was the same. I couldn't wait to get out in the workforce. I
I wasn't interested in study, and I just wanted to get out in the real world and do things to do. So it's when you look back, I wouldn't change anything, but it would have been nice to have been a better student, perhaps.
Yeah, but the thing is, sometimes back then you're studying stuff you really didn't want to study, and now if you go back to study something, you go 100% because you go, I'm interested in learning about that.
That's
as
right.
opposed to some concept, abstract or otherwise, you think, I don't really see the use of this because whatever the case. Yeah. How do you balance?
They can bite you on the arse, though. I was always lucky. I always knew what I wanted to do, which was always. I think from grade 5 or 6, I knew I wanted to be a member of parliament. So me, I always had the great luxury. I used to say this before I was. So I'm not just saying it now that I am a member of parliament, but before I used to say to friends or family, I say, look, even if I die, I'm never a member of parliament. I die with the comfort that I knew what I wanted to be.
Wow.
So that to me, that was a great comfort because so many people in our community don't know what they want to be, and maybe just being yourself is fine. That speaks more about me that I'm even defining it that way, because being a great citizen and many other things is awesome. I'm not downgrading that, but for me, I knew what I wanted to be. So that was very liberating. It was just a question of whether I was ever going to get there, and I was never doubted that I would. But there were times that that it didn't look great. I mean, 6 months before I was selected by my party, not even 6 months, it would have been 3 months, I sat at a pre-selection where you get all the members of the party who come and they sit in an RSL or a local bowls club or wherever it is, and they vote who they want to represent them, 100 or so people. And I had no one sitting other than my wife, no one sitting on that stage, no one competing against me, and the members voted not to proceed with the vote at all, much less vote for me.
Wow.
So, it's timing, right? And perseverance and hard work.
We're going to go back, I think, because you mentioned about you knew what you wanted to do when you were 5, because that blows...
Grade 5.
Grade 5, sorry.
Grade 5.
That blows me
Not
away.
quite 5.
But so that's really pushing it. Yeah, I want to be a politician.
Yeah.
I'm 5 years old, not an astronaut, not a policeman.
Yeah.
I want to be a politician. I want to be, and we will jump to that after this question. How do you balance the whole political life with your family life? You got a couple of kids by this.
Yeah, 3 kids.
3 kids. So you got 3 kids, and you've got a family. We both agree that time's the most valuable resource. How do you?
Look, I don't get the balance very well at the moment at all. I think that's the truth, but I'm conscious of that, and I'm also lucky because I came into politics later in life. My kids have had the benefit of having me around a lot and doing a lot with them.
When they were young?
Yeah.
Oh, that's very important.
So, my kids are now 17, 16, 13, which is still youngish at the youngest end, and I've, thinking recently about trying to sneak a couple of days to spend with my youngest and just do something, whatever that is, whether it's go away to Beechworth or Sydney or whatever. It could be anything. So I'm conscious of that. But they also, through social media, they can watch. My eldest is increasingly interested in politics. Oh yeah, I know.
Dissuaded. No.
I do dissuade him. Isn't that awful?
Oh.
I do. I'm like, sweet, this is brutal. He sees the brutal side of it through my experiences. He probably sees the good stuff too, but it's hard to fully communicate the brutal side until you're there and in the job. That's different.
Let's face it, when you talk about experiences, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people over the last 20, 30 years, teach a person to drive a manual car, give them a manual, they'll never be able to drive. They have to get in the car and feel that clutch. That's right, I take the clutch off that. You can read it all you like, but until you actually experience, same as being in love. You can read a book on, but until you actually love, you've got no bloody idea.
That's right.
So, yeah, and that I suppose when it comes to kids, you don't want to. We're a summation of experiences. That's our life, and you don't want to take away experiences from your children, but at the same time, you don't want them to experience too many bad experiences in the process of experiencing life.
Yeah, hence the helicopter parent, right?
That's probably a complete and utter podcast in itself. We want our children to be better than us. We want them to experience things through making mistakes because that's when you learn. but we sort of don't want them to experience some of the potentially darker experiences as a human being you can go through.
100%. I'd agree with that.
It's, yeah. Oh, we're going to go back to grade. Well, let's go back to the start.
Yes.
And we were talking off camera that you remembered most of your childhood, but apart from the years of 0 to 12 months, that just blew me away. So you honestly can remember 2 or 3 years old?
I think, yeah. I do,
Gee.
yeah, a lot. It is. I suppose that's, is that strange?
Well, I don't know. I think you must have a very good memory.
Well, no, because I don't feel I do. Reasonable for events and things, certainly of that period of life. I suppose what helps me, maybe it helps me, is the fact that we moved quite a lot. That there's distinct, if you're moving,
right.
Say, I was just saying to you before we started shooting that I think the first house I would have lived in was in Wheelers Hill in the eastern suburbs. I don't know that categorically. Both my parents have passed away. I could ask someone who might know, but. And then I think we moved up to Ballarat, and I'd never really given it much thought how long we'd lived there for. But I think it is because my brother had started rep. So it probably is 3 or 4 years even at its longest. Then we came back to the eastern suburbs, and but every time we stepped into a different place, it's a completely different ecosystem. And so that there's so many more markers in a sense that
makes
are very
sense.
easy to identify with. Except for Wheelers Hill, which I have no memory of. But, even coming back, initially, I think my mother moved to Greensboro, then to Ivanhoe. And then I remember being in prep in Ivanhoe Primary School, and then so on and so forth. And we sort of we did like an arch back around to, the entire eastern suburbs where we've covered, with a stint over in Werribee.
Wow.
In, I think it was year 10 or 11.
That would have been mostly farmland back then.
No.
No, but where
Back in the 1930s.
all right. Maybe I exaggerate. It was totally rural. No.
It was booming even then. It was it had busted out of that country sort of feel. My parents
sorry,
broke
Werribee.
up. Sorry, Werribee. Gee, it was beautiful country town aspects. The old Werribee part, but I love that year. Even now, it was. In some ways, it was less enjoyable. No, I should take that back. I loved the experience full stop. There were some harder aspects. I had incredibly bad acne, and that was not an easy thing to have as a young lad, and not an easy thing to have and make friends. I could hear one of the boys in the class was talking about he must have an STD, and then someone said no, no one would have sex with that essentially.
Oh,
yeah,
those things stick.
I suppose it has, but I didn't. In truth, I didn't disagree with it. It looked bloody awful. You can't take offence to a comment.
I had a bit of a beard of pus at one stage, but it cleared up quick. But some people had really bad acne.
And kids are brutal, right? So and truthfully
and
so. And I don't know if they mean the harm that they do. I don't think they do, because if we go back and look at our own childhoods, I don't know that you fully. Hence, we treat the younger brain very differently because it's less developed.
I don't think they understand the full ramifications of what they're saying.
Correct.
But I will also say there's some people who are cruel by nature, and others who are.
But isn't that the nurture?
Yeah.
Isn't that the example they've got from their parents?
Which is nature.
Like I don't think they were bad kids.
Oh, I disagree.
I don't think they start. I don't think any kid starts off bad. Starts off. What human being on earth starts off bad? I don't think they do. I think they're a canvas. They're an unbelievable, beautiful canvas that we can mold in our own image or someone else's image or whatever it is. But I don't think
there's always going to be a genetic predisposition to certain behaviour. I remember there was a local kid. He was like 5, and we had our cat had kittens, and he did horrible things to those kittens. And then later on, you read and you find out that all these serial killers all started off. First, they kill insects, then they go and they gradually get up in size until they're killing mammals. So I reckon,
you're a firm no.
Yeah, I reckon there are some people out there. They're pretty horrible.
There are some Damians out there, you reckon? It's a cultural reference. So you might have to put subtitles as to what I'm referring to there.
Damien was that was a part of that was like this
Omen.
The Omen, Omen 1, Omen 2. Those sort of like they were quite scary.
I thought so. Yeah,
Don't
like Cujo. See, now we're going back way too far.
Cujo was about a rabid Saint Bernard. Yes,
the poor old Saint Bernards. I don't know whether the sales increased or decreased for Saint Bernards on the back of that.
That's a good question. I don't know. I remember the dog. It was. I mean, I always find those Saint Bernards pretty horrible. Anyway, they got so much saliva. Good dogs, but they're so much saliva. Slopping around. So you've moved around by the sound of it, and then in grade 5 you said, I want to be a politician. You knew you want to be a poly.
I definitely knew. I think I was just passionate about the environment. I was concerned that, before I even got the opportunity to go to Africa to see any rhinos or elephants, there'd be none left. I was concerned that the rainforest in the Amazon would be depleted and gone.
Well, in grade 5?
Yeah.
So you were really aware of what was going on in the world?
I don't think just me. I think kids like they are today. When I go to schools today, they're just as aware today of the environmental challenges we have as we were back then. And we were... even the mainstream media as it was then, even they were discussing issues like recycling and like the ozone layer and all these kinds of things. So I think, and I wasn't being bombarded necessarily, but I was certainly very much aware of it, and through schoolwork and projects and bushfires. And, I lived through that period where you had the Ash Wednesday bushfires. So you sort of, you knew about the interconnectedness of the environment and our relationship with it. So for me, for whatever reason, that was probably more a personal interest and personal concern for the environment. But
you could have said to yourself, instead of going politician, you could have said, I want to be an environmental scientist.
I don't know that. I think I was smart enough to know I didn't have the brain for that.
Really?
Yeah. I don't have any tabs on myself in terms of my own mental capacity. Well, I wish it was more.
But that leads me to the question, but you had brains enough to become a politician.
Just.
I'm sorry.
It's arguable that you need any brains to become a politician, so that's what the public would be saying and thinking, and they're right, on occasion they're right. You just need to put your hand up at the right time in the right place, and suddenly, wow,
look,
it's happened.
There has been some incredibly erudite, intelligent, amazing politicians, and there's been... like in all walks of life. But I'm just amazed that politics was at grade 5. Definitely. It's hard, I suppose it's hard for me to personally understand, because it took me a long time to work out what I liked doing.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, it's I like learning things, and I like passing them on, and I like talking. And I do love the environmental side, conservation. I had a background in conservation, land management, as well as renewables and other stuff. So I've done a lot because I'm, but to know it, grade 5 is just wow. It's just really impressive to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that it is. I think it's just. But thank you.
You're welcome. You should. All right. So grade 5. So next year, grade 6. What high school did you go to?
I went to Eltham High.
Wow, very progressive school back then, was it? Oh,
I don't know. By progressive, you mean we turned up? Or is that the full extent of it?
Well, Eltham has it had a name. It was originally an artists' community, a lot of mud brick houses. A few hippies up there, alternative thinking, a lot of environmentalists.
Yeah.
A lot of professionals.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Moving on.
I don't know. I look back. I don't know. I'm trying to be. It's not often I'm trying to be diplomatic, but I am trying to be diplomatic. Yes, I went to Eltham High. There was some great teachers, and I'm thankful for them and what they did. I think, like so many state schools, and I'm still to this day very passionate about state schools. Did they have the facilities, the resources, that other schools that are not state schools, did they have it? No, I don't think they did. Did that impact me in any way? Probably not for me. I don't know. I'd have to really think about that. I think, I don't rave about it. Let me put it that way.
You're the same as me. I went to, well, you're a Melbourne boy, Chadstone High and Chatty High, and it is no more. But I remember with travelling on the Glen Waverley line, past, the Scotch College and St Kevin's, and seeing these amazing manicured cricket grounds. We had a bloody gravel pit in high school, and I really felt the difference. And back then, the difference between a government school and a private school was there was a big difference in regards to socioeconomic and who went. Now it's sort of narrowed a little bit. Look, I'll jump a bit. What is your whole view of the government school, I'll say versus, because I can't think of another word, versus the private school sector, like in regards to...
Yeah, it's funny because even reflecting on my answer to you then, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, am I being fair? Like, at the end of the day, I've done okay, and most of my mates will have done okay, and so I might be a little bit unfair, and I try not to come at from an envy perspective either, right? Because it's easy to point over there and say, look at that bright, shiny place, and they got a 50-metre indoor pool, and mate, we're going off to the shitty local pool, and, it's bloody freezing. So does it always make a difference? No, and I don't want to be envious either, because that doesn't get you anywhere, and I don't think it's productive. Comparing is a great way to end up being very unhappy in life. Just don't do it. Don't compare yourself to others. So I try not to do it, but I just do. I think the smart person in me says the answer is not begrudging somebody else something better. The answer is investing more in state-based education. That's certainly where I come at it from. Even then, I think I knew that well enough. It's not that I begrudged somebody else having a better school or better facilities. I think it's great. I just would want more people to have... I don't want anyone to miss out on an opportunity because they went to a shitty school.
Yeah.
And by shitty, I'm not referring to the teachers and the principals and the leadership, because they're usually awesome. Like, that's not what it's about. But it is about all the extras they have. They can only do so much with the money they have, the time they have, the assets they have. Like, I see that every day now even, and I worry for some of our state schools, because particularly they're getting smaller, sometimes the principal has to do everything. And in the private system, that is not the case. So, I want to give them all the resources they need to do their best. And very many of them are there to try and do their level best to, raise these kids up as well. So it is about the resources we give them. And we keep falling short on that count, I think.
And that's irregardless of which political party's in power. That's been like that for a very long time.
Yeah. Well, we had the old Gonski thing that everyone agreed to Gonski, and now they're not actually paying the money to do it, which is what the teachers' union rightly is saying. Well, hang on, you've pulled out, in The Age and all the other media outlets have all reported, these guys are just they're not actually committing the money that they know and agreed to do so. So what was the fight about? We had the fight, we won, Gonski's there, we know the funding model, and then we still refuse to fund it to that extent. Well, it becomes a bit of a piss take, right?
Oh, I think that's a good title for it. A piss take. You're right.
Yeah.
We'll come back to your chronological progression.
Sorry, I keep throwing you off.
No. Sorry, no, because that's in normal conversation, as in off camera. That's the way my brain works. I'm going all over the place, but trying to get some kind of end goal. But in this particular conversation, it's fantastic. It's great. I really, really appreciate you are brutally honest, it seems.
Well, I'm trying to be less brutal.
So down the track, maybe if this goes well, we'll come back for a part 2. So you're
this could be the bookend. Is that what you're saying? This is actually the bookend.
No, stop it. I should be laughing so much. You're throwing me off now. Okay, sorry. No, it's great. Sorry, whoever's listening and watching, right, for my behaviour.
Val is just composing themselves, and I'm saying Val. I'm not going with Val.
All right. No, it's a natural thing. People naturally shorten things, and it's like. And I remember when I was young, there was a football player called Val Perovic. He was pronounced Perovic, but it's actually Perovic because he was, it's all ich or vic in Serbian or Croatian. And people said, oh, yeah, it's Val. What's short for Valentino? I said, no, Velimir, but no one calls me that. But anyway, so
we like it. I like Val better than Valley.
Yeah, well, it's just...
Valley sort of... There's an uncertainty at the end of it. I like Val's to definitive.
It's funny because people do naturally do that. So there must be something in the name that just goes shorten it. Or, you know, as I said, you can call me whatever you like, just don't call me late for dinner. Sorry, my daughter who hates those dad jokes, but I don't care.
She's going to want that edited straight out. She's like, Dad,
she don't listen to it.
She's not listening.
Nah, they don't. My wife doesn't listen to it.
We are safe. We can say whatever we want about them.
To a degree. So you're at Eltham High. Yes. And
that's right.
What was the next step? And I got to ask, mentors. You mentioned there was a couple of teachers there. Was there any mentors from that school? And if not, the importance of mentors for young men growing up? Because we don't have that kind of process. We don't get taken out to the bush and left to fend for ourselves when we're 16. We don't have that process in the Western modern world. Which is a bit
we don't, do we? I think, look, the one that stood out was probably one of the English teachers. He was quite harsh, but I think was good. Harsh in terms of just old school, right? Just sit up, behave yourself, listen up. 3 teachers. The politics teacher was encouraging, which is great. It's a great asset. And then the poor French teacher who got the worst aspect of me. And I was one of these boys who was and she was, I guess she was from Namir or somewhere. It speaks to my stupidity as a young man that I can't even tell you where she's from, but she could clearly speak French, which she was trying to teach us boys. And I was one of the boys who treated the French lesson as the bludge lesson, where you sit at the back of the room and just take the piss, which is what I did.
Yeah,
effectively. Maybe in part 2 because I wasn't very good at languages. I mean, maybe that's, I'm giving myself an out clause there, but I mean, I would sit there and I literally would look at, and I can tell you what room it was, and I'd say, but that's where they speak French. It's like darn language. Like basically, I was saying, who gives it? This is where would I ever need? Where am I going to ever need that in my life? So years later, when I got my first job with the United Nations in Francophone Africa, which for those listeners means
there's a lot of French speaking.
The parts of Africa that only speak French, the Karma bus well and truly hit me right in the ass. Bang.
We'll go. So we'll come back.
Smart-ass little boy got his message. Where will I even need it? Congo, Burundi, West Africa. That's where you'd need it, sweetheart. It's like, if only I could have spoken to my younger self.
Wow. We're definitely going to be talking about the United Nations, but there was a couple of teachers. Three teachers that are pretty good, and
or more potential. I mean, there were actually many more, including a science teacher, the legal teacher. Like, that's why I say, when I'm being maybe a little bit harsh about my education, I think sometimes it's just about the extra things, because I had a stepbrother and stepsister, so I had some exposure to things they did. And my father at that point lived in Queensland, so I'd go and visit them and stay with them. So I sort of had this unique experience where I could see a different world existing and what that looked like. And I knew it was very different than the world that I inhabited, that's for sure.
So you're at high school. You've had some half decent teachers, and I'm not playing
teachers.
Some great teachers. But what happened after? What happened? You did year 12, and tell us,
including Mrs. Newton, which I didn't add at primary school. She was a great teacher,
and you remembered her name too. So she must have.
And Mr. Glare at primary school.
You have got a good memory.
My mum had to march down to primary school. I'm not going to say this teacher's name, although I do remember it. She had to demand that I receive remedial reading and writing spelling lessons, because I was and remain a terrible speller and struggled to spell or put sentences together. So,
what, the written? Obviously not.
Yeah, the written,
not the spoken, because you're very
well. Because I suppose I made up for it, right? That stands to reason. So whenever there's a project and there's a difference between write it or say it, I'd be saying it.
Yeah, right.
And there'd be one other student at high school that'd be the same. That was Merrick Watts, and Merrick Watts used to sit. He was a year ahead of me, but we had the composite grades as we got older. And I don't know whether he stayed down a year. And apologies to Merrick if he didn't, but and he would be in the same way I knew what I wanted to do. He knew he wanted to be a comedian, and he would sit in the classroom and say to the teachers, "I'll be paid one day to do this." And his job was really literally being the class clown and entertaining. And he would literally say, "Well, one day I'll be paid to tell these jokes," and so he was just as certain about what he wanted to do.
So I'm really interested in that process of how people's brains work, because I'm interested in how my own brain works. the politician side, did you see it clearly in your head? Did you see the
Oh,
end
it was-
goal, or what it was?
Oh, for me, it was an innate sense of, yeah, it'll happen. Like it was just steadfast belief that it would happen.
No two ways about it. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Although sometimes it's got to be said, as I got older and the decades went on, at some point you might either want to diagnose me or medicate me, but I got there.
Or both.
Or both. Preferably both. But I got
Wow.
there. Yeah. And even on the day, it's funny, on the day that, so having sat in front of a crowd of people who put their hand up, not even to consider my nomination to be in a seat, some 3 months later, thereabouts, I went to another pre-selection, which no one supported me for, no one predicted I would win. And that morning was the closest I'll ever get to what I would say would be a religious experience. And in terms of just, I had a single-mindedness, a calmness. I went for a run that morning. It was a sunny day, so I remember thinking to myself, the sun is shining brightly in Victoria again. And so that just stuck with me. So that'll be the start of the speech. In these things, when you're in front of 100, 200 people, whatever it is, you usually have a 5-minute speech. It's very well timed, and you can't cock it up, because if you cock that up, you're not winning.
Gotcha.
But in order to connect with people, I knew that I couldn't. I hated writing stuff down anyway, but I tend to do better if I don't have a speech. And so I knew that in order for me to win, I had to really pull it out of the bag and give a great speech, because you got to be able to connect with people. If you're reading off a speech, it's very hard to connect emotionally with people.
Correct.
And you want to be able to see the people in the room. You want to refer to them, whether it's Tommy or Shelley or whoever it is you're referring to. So I knew, but I just had a sense of, I knew I had it, even to the point where we go through the process. I took that confidence in with me. It was like a bubble you couldn't burst. We went to the end of the process. It takes hours, because there were so many people. I can't remember how many there were, but we had 10 round tables you do. So this is like this table here, but I'm sitting here with my scrutineer, my wife, and then maybe they've separated the 200 into 10 groups of 20, and then you'll get questions from those 20 in these 10 round tables. They can ask you whatever they like. Then you come into the main forum where they all come back together, you give your speech, and they vote. So
wow.
we went off to the voting.
It's a real process.
Yeah. We went off to the voting room, and that evening, my wife was supposed to go to the theatre, and I just said to her, and it hadn't finished. Kennett hadn't finished. So I said, just go. I said, look, if I lose, who gives a shit? Like, whatever. I'll just start walking home, and you can pick me up when I go. Like, it is what it is. And if I win, happy days. Like, I'm happy. I'll walk. And it was at Moonee Valley. So she left. And that was the right thing to do. And I won. And I walked from Moonee Valley to an offie, which is an English reference to the off license.
Yes.
Got a Jack Daniels and kept walking along the street, enjoying myself and having a Jack Daniels on the way.
You must be walking on clouds. That must have been a fantastic.
Quite happy.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, it's quite happy. I mean, I wasn't elected yet. That was still to come, and that was not always a guarantee either. But it was as close as you could get to doing that, because it was the second position out of 2. So everyone expected it to win, but in this game, expectations, you don't want to get ahead of yourself.
And never make assumptions, because they make an ass out of you and me. And
real quick.
It's true, isn't it?
Yeah, it is true.
Don't count your chickens before they hatch. All those
very wise sayings.
They are wise, aren't they? They all have an element.
Judgeable by its cover.
Absolutely.
I was talking about this with the
pot calling the kettle black.
One of my staff, I was talking to her, she's from China, and I was talking to her about some of these sayings we have that are identical in Chinese. There's not a lot that are, but never judge a book by its cover is one of the ones that she said is identical. They use the same.
Well, it makes sense, doesn't it?
It does.
That's the thing, because culturally it doesn't matter. Like, our brains all work the same. Yeah, that makes sense in Bulgarian, that makes sense in Chinese and English. And that's what I try to remind myself. Okay, so you're at high school and you finish high school.
Yep.
What are you doing now?
I went for a year to Galvin Park Secondary College. Must add, it's now changed its name. It doesn't exist anymore like that. That was in Werribee, when I went to Werribee for a year.
Oh, okay.
We moved over there. Mum had friends there. She was struggling financially at that point in time. I think she thought it'd be easier and cheaper to live there. I think it was, both in terms of rental, but also just friends who helped her. One girlfriend in particular who helped. I mean, they would help each other, right? They'd have a kitty that if some weeks if one couldn't afford something, they'd help one way or the other.
Well, okay,
Which
so
I didn't
it's
even know about that until later on in life, funny enough. I mean, I knew we were always struggling with money. Money was always the issue at our house. You know, we just didn't have money for, the voluntary fees. It was always a question of terse conversations between mum and the school saying, we just don't have it. No, you're not getting it. Yeah. And they used to be more robust, I think, in those days of trying to get the money, whereas these days they're not allowed to be that robust.
I didn't know that.
No, and I think there's still a correlation, sadly, between, well, then little Johnny's not going to have his crayons, or little Johnny's not going to have this, or Sally's not going to have that. So I think there's still some correlation there. But no, so we had that year in Werribee. And then I wanted to get out and work. I wanted to, get into the workforce. I'd already started working when I think my first job was 11. I started working, so after school. And the first thing I did, the first time I made money was, I don't know how my mother let me do it. I mean, talk about delinquent. She's passed away, so I can say that. I think that's the way it works, right?
Yes.
I love my mum to bits and my father, but a spade is a spade.
Yeah.
Like I'm an 11-year-old selling diaries door to door. Like, does that sound like a stupid thing to send?
Diaries.
Diaries. Yeah. Which I got from the local youth centre. So whatever the markup was, that earned me a little bit of cash that I could
did all right?
empower myself. Yeah, did all right. Like, they probably bought off me because I was bloody sorry for me. It's bloody Oliver's come to ask for some cash and he's giving me a diary. So
Probably the first thing they write in the diary, just spend some money with this poor kid selling
poor
diaries.
Buggers, don't leave us alone.
Wow.
Giving me his $5 for his shitty diary and, send him on his way.
That's very entrepreneurial of you.
I just think, innovation is spawned and activity spawned of...
necessity.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So I did that. Then I went from that youth centre where then I think they needed a cleaner because their cleaner went on holidays, and it was probably another youth like myself. I don't think it was. Maybe it was whoever it was, and that was. I feel like it was $11 an hour, which is big money.
Yeah. Back then.
Yeah.
I think you were doing all right.
Doing well.
You're doing all right.
So then I would clean after school. I would go and clean the toilets, clean the ashtrays, all that. So back in those days, I was smoking around the office, of course. I was sucking all that in. Passive smoker. And then I would knock on doors of factories near school, and then so most days after school I'd go to one factory, clean up again, because all the lads in these factories, they don't want to clean up their own freaking bathrooms and the dishes and the shit all around the place. So I'd go and clean up one and spend 45 minutes an hour. Then I'd go to the next one, go there, clean up, then I'd go home and do whatever. I mean, mum was always working, and the older we got, sort of the later she'd work. So if she got home 6:30 was sort of usually, but then it could be for a few years there it was even later. It could be late depending how busy she was and what she was doing.
Because as you said before, money was always an issue growing up.
Always.
Is that something that moulded you like later on in regards to when you started working as an adult, like, hey, I want to make a few bucks?
Yes and no. I didn't want to be like that, but I probably should have focused more on, I think, it's funny, I'll fast forward to I think I placed little value on money. It's a necessity, we have to have it, and I know the value of it in terms of putting a roof over your head, and I appreciate that absolutely.
But you're not a slave to it.
No.
Yeah, that's
I'm
good.
not a slave to it, and I don't, if I wanted to be a gazillionaire, I think you would have had the focus when you're young to do that.
I totally
that to me
agree.
never equated happiness, and I knew that myself, because you also see, just by observation, there's too many people who have lots of money and are bloody miserable. So I never fooled myself about that. It's nice to have enough money that you can afford things. You can pay for the car insurance, that you're not scrambling to pay for
but after that's marginally
the fruit,
diminishing
the veggies,
returns.
the bloody rent, all the bills that come in, car rego, all those sort of big things that mum she struggled as soon as she got. If you got the car insurance, rego at the same time, that's just, that would wipe her out. Easy.
It's what you said, science bears out, the statistics bears it out. There's a certain point where it used to be $1 million, I think about 10, 15 years ago. I think probably it's gone up, and up to that in Western world, $1 million, you're getting a little bit happier, and you reach a plateau, and after that, there's no increase. Other things start kicking in, the fear of losing your money and all of that sort of stuff. And
and that old saying, you can't take it with you, right? Which I've been a little bit slavish to, stupidly, because I need to leave something behind. But the truth is, I have lots of experience with my kids and our family. And I was looking at photos last night, funnily enough, before I came here, not unrelated, but and my kids and I and the whole family, we've all had some amazing experiences. together. And I cottoned on from a friend in the UN. I'd visited her in Thailand. They lived in Thailand, and I used to live there, but I lived in Thailand. And she was taking one of their 2 kids to New York and leaving the other one at home. I'm like, that's sort of in Australia we travel as a family when we go away, and it's sort of a lot of my friends who I worked with in United Nations did that, and I sort of cottoned on to that. I was like, you know what, I don't mind that idea, because you can't always take the whole family. For us, it's 5 of us, but you can just take one. And that one is that opportunity just to have those little conversations, to give them that, when you've got 3 kids, it's hard to get a word in sideways, let alone have a moment to think about what they're saying. So I sort of then went in that pathway of, my eldest son loved aviation and I loved travel anyway, so any excuse. And so I would look for the cheapest flights, and I'd take each of them by themselves wherever in the world we could imagine. And we've done some amazing things very cheaply. Like we got to Bali once for $19 one way, $19 return. Yeah, we got to Dubai for $500 return. And this is still a luxury to have. But we got to Dubai, and I said to my son, he was 10, 11, 12 at the time, and I said, we base ourselves in Dubai. We'll try to go to. We actually wanted to go to Iran because I'd never been to Iran and been told how beautiful a place it is. And because he liked aviation, they also had Mahan Air, which is their airline. They were still using the A340, which is a 4-engine plane, single level. Anyway, we applied for the visa. We got refused. First time I've ever been refused to any country, including him. We both got refused. Wow. And so we went to Jordan, where I had lived again when I worked in United Nations. Went to Jordan at night time. We went down to it was a stopover for a few hours. So we went down to the amphitheatre. So there I'm with my 12-year-old son in the amphitheatre, in a high-rise. It's not a high-rise like we're thinking. It's a high-rise like a sort of brick building, looking over the Roman amphitheatre, lit up at night. We've got chickens, ducks, rabbits, guinea pigs walking around there. I don't know why. It was like Alice in Wonderland. We had a gorgeous meal, hightailed it back to the airport, went to Egypt, got to Egypt at 1:30 in the morning, and I said to my son, look at that. I said, because I'd been there before, so we stayed at one of the pensions, which is like a hotel, but it's like a Airbnb or the old backpackers really, and it's in front of the Sphinx, and you could see the silhouette of the Sphinx and the pyramids. And that next morning we woke up early and we went in. I'd never bothered to go inside the pyramids at the Giza Plateau there, so we actually had arranged a tour guide, which I never normally do because I just do my head in. Like it's like being in a museum and being told everything. It's like, I'll work it out. But anyway, she'd arranged for us to go inside the pyramid. And to this day, it's one of the top 5, I say top 5, including my children's birth and other things, moments I've ever had with my son, because we're climbing down inside this pyramid. And if you're claustrophobic, you're not going to love it because, if someone in front of you has a heart attack or something, like you just got to keep calm, because there's no way out.
Yeah, right.
It's that way. So to this day, it's one of those experiences that I've got someone off track here, but I'd rather be spending money on that experience than leaving behind a mansion that what are they going to do with?
It's a really good point, isn't it? Because I've talked to my father when he was dying, and a few other people dying. They're talking about their experiences, and I've always thought this was the case. You are a summation of experience, and when you're on your deathbed, you're going, I had some really nice girlfriends, had a lovely family. Not maybe that all, but you think of all the experience, and I went trekking around here, and yes, I did some really interesting stuff. Not going, yes, I've got $100,000 in my bank, and I've got you don't
$3 million home sitting here.
You don't do that. It becomes nothing.
Nothing.
But there is obviously this economic reality of the world we live in where we need X amount of money to do certain things. But just to be aware that it's not the be-all or end-all. I still haven't got to the point, Nick, where your political career has started. So
taken off late.
Well, no, but you mentioned in the podcast brief notes, which I looked at the break, it does mention that you did something in Eltham at the show.
Yeah, I stood for council.
And how old were you?
18.
Oh, wow.
Oh, no.
Gee.
What a baby.
You would have known bugger all back then. Sorry.
I thought I knew a lot.
That's all I did.
Of course. I was a world of talent and font of knowledge.
Wow.
Back in those hefty days, 18.
But that's brave to do that.
Brave or stupid. Take your pick.
Or both. You can be both.
I think you can be both. I think we can forgive our young people, and I certainly forgive myself. Yeah, I loved it. It was a great time to do it. it's all collective learnings, right? So you learn from that. Arguably took me a long time to learn, clearly, how to be successful, or stop standing in seats that are not your team. That might be the other lesson.
Yeah, wow.
Someone's got to do it though.
Well, tell us more. You were 18. It's
18, stood for council.
Yeah.
The opportunity arose because there was a vacancy. And in fact, the thing that stands out to me most of all was that my opponent at the time, who was an older gentleman, only came to the fore to resist me because of the party I was associated with. So that just gives you a bit of an insight to the political world. When you put your hand up and I always took the decision to join a political party very seriously. I joined when I was 16, as early as I could, 31st of July 1991, for those who want to know.
You have got a good memory. I'm keep on saying that.
Well, it's just, I'm on repeat, But for me, it was an important decision. I ranked it up there with decisions like marriage, frankly, and having children, because once you do it, you can't undo it. And people will treat you a certain way. And people might think that was a silly answer for me to give, comparing it to marriage, but the only comparison is once you've done it, you can't undo it.
Yeah.
You can divorce, but you will have been married.
Yes.
And if you joined a political party throughout your life, you will have been, but he was a member of this party or that party. It's like you've put on the Collingwood jumper or the Essendon jumper. It's tribal. It's very tribal. And so my entire life I've been, at one point I lived in London, and I went to an interview with an agency called Goal, who were it was an Irish NGO, non-government organisation, who did humanitarian work. And at some point in the interview, I clicked, I was certainly not getting the job. And I even inquired, why have you got me here? And their words were, and it stuck with me, it would take a quantum leap for them to employ me, but they were fascinated by my background, because my background seemed to them to be more right of politics, and yet I was applying for these jobs in the left. And so it just speaks to people's, and I still fight this to this day, these preconceptions people have of what a Labor person is or a Liberal person is. They're usually nonsensical. They're usually not accurate in this day and time. So that's just, you will be treated a different way. I'm very conscious with my own children too. They're their own people. They can do and be whatever they want to be. But they will be prejudged by society because you're a member of a party, or your father's a member of a party, or, it comes with
as long as
baggage.
they don't vote for One Nation. Maybe we'll take that bit out.
No, leave it all in.
No, it was a half joke, half serious.
Well, you'd want to think your kids do vote for you, right?
Of course.
You would. If they're not voting for you,
you're doing something wrong. Yes.
But I think I'm not sure how common or uncommon that is. I can't imagine my children not voting for me. But I think there are some that don't, and I don't know. I'm not going to get up on my high horse and judge others.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? Because you're talking about the people involved in the party. That's what makes the party. Like, I talk about Greenwood, and I work for Greenwood Solutions. But what's Greenwood? It's just a name. It's the people who make up that business and who they are and their relationships. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Like, if you'd worked for Google at some point, people say, well, that's that guy who worked for Google.
Ex-Google person.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's pinning your colours to a pole, really.
But that's because people love to compartmentalise to make sense of the world, don't they? This is what we do.
It's quick and dirty, right?
It's quick and dirty.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We make a number of assumptions based on these things: how old, where they've been, who they belong to, all those sorts of things. It's what our society does. We're very tribal.
And I can understand why people do that, because of the whole time being your most valuable resource. So it could be a life or death situation if you don't make a quick assessment of someone's character or who they are. It could be to your detriment, but you really owe people a chance to explain, or not even explain to who they are, but for you to understand who they are and find out with time.
Well, I'm trying to break those boundaries down too, because one of the great things of this job is you get school groups who come to the Parliament, and I do a tour with them, and I'll say to them, they're grade 5s and 6s, just like I was, and I will urge them, and I never talk politics to kids. No need to. It's irrelevant to them. They just need to know that we represent them, and that's the way it works. I talk more broadly about how we have houses, because that's an equivalence for the schools. Every school will have usually 4 houses at a primary school. Red house, green house, or they'll give them acacia or different names. But the 2 messages I really want them to leave with is this place, Parliament, is only as good as the people that make it up. And what we need is awesome little girls and boys who want to be politicians in the future to put their hand up and be part of the solutions. And so that's my first message to them. And then the second message to them, and I'll give it at some point during the tour, is no matter what others do, if you have a member of Parliament who works their backside off for you, I don't care what their politics is. I couldn't give a damn.
Yeah.
I don't care what party they are.
Yeah.
Vote for them. And I say that now. If you have someone who genuinely gives a damn and works their backside off day and night to advance the interests of their own community, then that's worth backing.
It's a really, really, really good point. And I've never really thought of it. I haven't thought of it like that. But now the way you've explained it to me, you're dead right, because...
And our system works, everyone gets it wrong. They vote the top down.
Yeah,
so they're voting for the leader. Do we like Daniel Andrews or not? Oh, yes,
yeah.
no, whatever. Who cares? Like, who's your local member? Because your local member in our system, whether it's federal or state, is the one deciding whether Daniel Andrews stays or not, because they're electing their leader.
Right.
So I urge people, vote bottom up. Because if you're voting bottom, if you get a great individual, a female or male, irrelevant, but if you get a great person who just is a good egg, not perfect, because we all make mistakes, but is a good egg, does their job really well and really tries hard to fix things, then you're much more likely to have, if we all have those kinds of people, they're not self-serving to an extended extent, then there's every chance and probability they will make a better choice in terms of who their leader is. So it will filter up, but it doesn't work the reverse way around.
No.
If you keep electing a leader because you like him or her, you could be having somebody at your community's detriment being returned on a massive margin just because someone likes the person up here.
Wow.
And we see that much of the west of Melbourne, where, and having lived there, I can tell you this, for decades, one side of politics just ignores it because they just always vote the same way. It's like they're all, one-eyed Collingwood supporters. And sometimes they'll do it to their detriment. In fact, frequently they will vote for that party to their detriment. Not always, but frequently, because they'll be the first to explain that, well, where's our bridges, where's our trains, where's our hospitals, where's our money for our schools, our maternity healthcare centres, et cetera, et cetera.
So it's like in the olden days, you want your champion from your local village to go and fight the champion.
That's what I want. But maybe that's just what I want. Maybe other people don't want that. Who knows?
No,
I don't know.
It makes...
Maybe I think about it. I probably think about it more than other people think about it.
No, you really elucidated clearly to me, because I fell into the camp of like you vote top down, and that's
you can do that from time to time.
But
you'll get a great leader that comes along, and you go, you know what, he or she is a standout, and that happens. We have that. I'm almost disproving what I'm saying for the first time, but Jess to me is a leader like that, and that's as political as I get today. But she is next level. She's unbelievably kind. She's got unbelievable instinct, and in this game, that's everything. Like, to make the correct decision day in, day out when you're making lots of decisions is hard. She's got a steel of character and a strength of character that will see her through if she gets the chance.
Wow.
She's the most exciting thing I've seen on my side of politics in my lifetime. Full stop.
Because a good captain, let's say a good captain of a ship, or let's say even a school, a good principal, they'll bring everyone up. A crappy principal, a crappy captain, everyone will get away with murder.
Well, that great leader will know how to get the best out of everyone.
Yes, that's right.
They'll understand, and Jess gets this intimately. She understands that that's her team, and her first job is to back her team. And so, in the time she's been there, we've already seen her go into bat for her entire team, regardless of their strengths or weaknesses, understanding they've all got a role to play. It's her job to help get the best out of them, not to drag them down or alienate them or pit them against each other. And so that's next level maturity and intelligence that can do that.
Do you think to be a good leader that you have to like people inherently? And I'm not being flippant. Do you have to like people and have empathy for people to understand?
To be a good leader? Maybe not.
Okay.
Because there's lots of good leaders who maybe don't do that. I'd want that, but I'm thinking my mind casts back in history,
yes.
World history.
Yeah. But they must have understood the human condition to be a leader. They must understand how people work.
Yes.
And it's like a good manager. They must, good manager, and this is the nature. I reckon I'm a great believer that you can't make good managers out of people unless they have that natural ability.
Yes.
You can learn techniques, but
Totally.
if you don't have the empathy or the understanding, organisational skills, doesn't matter how many weekends away to learn how to be a good manager you're going, you're still going to be crap.
Yeah.
And to be a good leader, you have to understand. You have to be able to see the capabilities and the shortcomings of the people underneath you or the people that you work with, and bring them up, and at the same time have this vision. So at least you have to have an understanding of people. You don't have to necessarily. Yeah, I see. You don't have to necessarily lie. You have to understand them.
Absolutely.
And understand yourself.
Yes. And not be afraid to embrace people who are maybe even smarter than you are, right?
That's the best thing, isn't it? Isn't that the best thing?
Absolutely.
To surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, so you're always learning. It's like they play.
It's not hard for me. But
most
people are smarter than me, so that's easy.
I'm smart enough to know that I'm fairly smart, and smart enough to know that I'm nowhere near a genius. And where I work, there is some incredibly smart people.
I'd love to be that smart. I really would. I would. I look on in admiration of people who are that clever. Like there are concepts I can't even begin to grasp. I think that, and I'm not sure I want to actually. In all truth,
well, we've only got X amount of time to do these. We can't.
Between podcasts too, right?
All right. Well, look, we're talking about leadership and politics, and thanks very much for pointing that out from the bottom up scenario. That is really interesting, right? I'm really going to ruminate on that after this conversation.
It's like I want to shake Victorians and say, "Listen, what are you doing here? What do you really want?"
Wow.
Sometimes, and I'd argue, Jesse's one of those times, but. What does your local member do? Have they reached out to you? Have they ever helped you? Have they let you down? Are they active? Do they commit to their schools and their sports clubs? Well, hold them accountable.
Gee, I'm questioning my political allegiance as we speak.
That's what I want you to do, because it shouldn't be about, I'm just going to barrack for Collingwood every day I go to this is not footy. It's not sport. It's in many senses, sport's very important, but in many senses it's actually, we need people to rise up a bit and think to themselves, well, is being tribal the answer? Because we don't preach it anywhere else in life.
Yeah.
We don't preach that you should just stick to your tribe. The world's going the opposite. We're understanding that we've got a lot to share with each other and to give to each other, and so to be so myopic when it comes to that choice and just ever because my mum and dad only ever voted this way and we're this family or that family.
We're a Labor family. We're a Liberal family.
That's right.
Yeah. Wow. We're the Greens family. Yeah. That's really wow. A lot to think about. Now, you mentioned the United Nations a few times, and
yes.
I don't know how many years after we last. So we're at this chronological point where you politics, Eltham, you're 18. Can we talk about what happened in between, or should we go straight to United Nations?
Straight to United Nations?
Because the United Nations must be a huge part of your life. I mean,
yeah, it was. It was. I had finished working in politics. I had an early opportunity back in the Kennett government to work in that office. Again, very serendipitous the way that came about. And I worked to the Premier's Chief of Staff as a very young buck, but it was great because I was thrown into the deep end. The Premier at the point had very few advisors. It was a very lean operation, and my job was essentially to do the Premier's mail. That is, open the mail. Do draft responses without ever having spoken to the Premier about what those responses would look like. Wow. So yeah,
wow, that's a bit of responsibility.
Yeah, you get the hang of it, and then do speeches. I think the first day I was asked to do a speech on the taxi industry, of course, which this young 20, 21-year-old knew nothing about. So very quickly, it's just like, well, get up to speed on it, like write the speech for the Premier.
And there ain't no AI back then.
No,
you have to do the hard yards.
No, but we're no.
So you're running his speech.
I mean, others obviously check it and review it and so on and so forth, but it was a great apprenticeship, and it was great because not only did I see what we did well, we the party, but what they did well, what the Premier did well, I also saw what I think we didn't do well in a number of areas. So it was a great apprenticeship. I really call it that. The Chief of Staff that brought me in was moved on, in fact, fell victim to others, and as did I at some point, and that's the.
What do you mean, fell victim to others?
Because it's an incredibly ambitious space. So, People look to replace people all the time.
Is it quite cutthroat like that?
Oh, yeah, very. Yeah, very much so.
Ah.
But that's not a bad thing either. It's just the nature of it. And that gave me an opportunity, as it turned out, to, I didn't, knowing I wanted to be in politics, I wouldn't say to people, you should just work in politics and then be a member of parliament. That what attributes do I bring? You can be a politico, but I'm not sure that adds value. And I was very conscious of that. I continued studying even at university. I should have done something different. I didn't. I did a Bachelor of Arts with a development major, which is, I managed to mould that into what I subsequently did when I went overseas. For your question, because my mother was from England, I went to Britain. I worked there, did all sorts of jobs, which were fascinating to me and fun, bit of a combination. And I found myself working, sending off to work and apply for the United Nations in Congo, Brazzaville. Now, Congo, Brazzaville at that point, relying on my not too great French. My goodness, there's a bit of Pinocchio coming out there. Can you speak French? Well, yes.
Fluently.
Yes, I will. By the time you hire me for this job.
That's good.
Lord. Yeah. I was working for the National Consumer Council at that point, but I'd worked for the Disability Rights Commission, Westminster City Council. I'd also worked as a waiter at Leicester Square.
Wow.
Chiquitos, which I loved. To this day, it's one of the jobs I loved the most. And perhaps if I don't win in November, I'll go back to waiting on tables. Just tip me, please.
I reckon you'll win.
We'll see. Time will tell. This will be for series number 7. We'll come back and talk about that. I applied for the job. I got it in Congo, Brazzaville, and they needed somebody who could, ironically, given what I'd said to you about my primary school years and my inability to be able to read or write, and it's true. I found myself,
speak French and then read and write.
All the things I couldn't do, they hired me for. It's not looking good for the United Nations, is it? No wonder we're such a mess. They've turned to me. Or maybe I was a fit. It was like, great, this guy can't read, he can't write, and he can barely speak. Give him the job. Maybe they had a sense of humour. So anyway, I quickly made up for most of that, I think. Loved the job. It was the end of the conflict there. And that job probably taught me the most about finding common ground, about how do you create peace from war, because it was the tail end. By and large, the war had been over at that point. There were some remnants, but not much. There wasn't a single...
Which war are we talking?
In Congo, Brazzaville.
What,
so
Brazzaville?
There's two Congos. There's Congo. There's the rumble of the jungle, which is the old Muhammad Ali and so on.
Yeah.
That's Congo Kinshasa. They're actually the two closest capitals on earth, and I could be fact checked on that, discounting the Vatican. But they're I know people will raise it. I'll raise it.
Nick McGowan said
he's lied. That's not true. But Congo Brazzaville didn't have a pane of glass that I could recall that wasn't smashed from a bullet. There was no traffic lights in the country. It's the first country I ever lived in with no traffic lights at all. Loved it.
What, damaged, or they just didn't have it as an infrastructure?
They had it once upon a time, being damaged to the war. There was no power. All of the cables, all the electricity wires had been looted through the war. So they're just poles. The entire country was out. Every place you had to have a generator. Yeah. And if you didn't have a generator, you didn't have water because the pump didn't work for the water, so you had neither. So you had to have a generator in every household. But it taught me that, every piece is imperfect. Every piece is quite distasteful, actually, but it's demonstrably better than the alternative, which is war, because war is just that ugly. And that was the first example where some of the programs that I was engaged with, and my job was to come in, do a specific job, work with the entire community, so the local governments, the federal government, provincial, it's all in French, but the NGOs, the donor community, diplomatic corps, and come up with a plan of action, a very well thought through, realistic plan. So we're not saving the country in one go. It's a 1-year plan with multiple years going forward. How many schools do we want to rehabilitate? Because at that point, the worst school had something like 900 children to one teacher. So that's just crowd control, right? They got no teachers, is what that tells you.
Boy.
So, so then the goal might be to rehabilitate 50 schools in a year. Even that's too large. It's large, yes. So we tried to be realistic, headed by the United Nations head in the country, who brought me on to do that job, and finished that job. And that sort of put me on a pathway, which they offered for me to stay after that job. And I sort of thought, just intuitively thought, no, end on a high. I have found in life you're always better off to end on a high. People tend to hang in too long. It's just human nature. I've seen that so often too.
Yeah, right.
So I went back to London, and before long I had a job interview for another job with the United Nations in Burundi. Burundi was still in the midst of their war.
So is it like a contract when you go into the United Nations?
That one was a short-term contract initially,
right.
direct with the United Nations Development Program in Congo, Brazzaville. Then when I applied for the humanitarian division of the United Nations, they're based in New York, but I was going to be in the field in Burundi. I actually came second. And it's sort of, and this started off a pattern in my life too, where often I haven't been the first choice. I'll come first, I'll come second. And I've from defeat, I have crafted victory or success. And so that's
sounds like Art of War or stuff to me.
It does a bit, doesn't it? Can't say I've read it all, but I'll take your word for it. But that's the truth. I have noticed that myself. So I didn't get the job, and then they came back to me later because that person dropped out. And next thing I was off to sort of war-torn Burundi at the end of the war. But we had the South African Special Forces were gradually bringing in returned leaders and protecting them. So protecting them from assassination and gunfire, and there was daily fighting. Like there wasn't a night there that I lived there twice. I went back with the peacekeeping operation years later, but there was a night in the first mission, the first time I was there, where you didn't have AK-47 rounds and gunships and all the.
Were you armed over there?
No. I was always civilian, never armed.
Yeah.
We worked. So in that case, I worked a lot with the South African Defence Force, and it was also a fascinating time in history because it had gone through the '94 all-party elections. So it had gone from apartheid to post-apartheid. Yeah. And then you saw in the Defence Forces, we went from a Colonel Smith, who's a colonel that I worked with, to Colonel Ngwebe. Yeah. So you saw the evolving nature of that Defence Force as well. So we had special forces in my first time there. VIP protection was their job, and some of the Air Force as well. So we got on very well with them, and it was a time where Australia was doing very well in cricket. So I'd spend a bit of time in the barracks. Amidst the bombing and the shelling and everything else, I had time for some cricket and some downtime, and a bit of South African beverage, shall we call it beverage?
What do you mean? What do they
like
have?
A drink.
Yeah, I know. I know what a
beverages.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Thanks, Nick. What kind of was it like a beer? Or?
No, I'm a spirits fan. I'm not into beer really. No, I'd have Clippies, which is Clipdrift. Richelieu is another one.
So it's fire water with a taste. Yeah, it's like grappa or
exactly. I'm not impressing anyone at this point. No, they'd be like, oh, that's just off. Yeah, but no, I had some great times.
And you got a good tolerance to alcohol, like.
It has a good tolerance to me, is what I think in me.
I've never heard of that.
The face doesn't scare it away.
That is a fantastic line. That is the best. It's got a great tolerance to me. That's fantastic.
But I try my best.
Wow.
I try. Look, I don't drink much these days. My general rule of thumb in this job is one drink, particularly. I try not to drink around kids. Sometimes you have a sport occasion where you can have one. I don't overdo it either. I'm not completely woke like.
But you're fit. You're a fit bloke. I assume because you're running and stuff, and your metabolism. You're not fat. Your metabolism's pretty fast.
But just because I'm not putting stuff in my cake hole, that's usually what it is. Like I'd love to just eat chocolate all day.
But what I'm saying is that your body be pretty. You'd be able to cope. I mean, I know you're not 20 anymore. I know that, but you know what I mean. If you're
35. Yeah.
Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah, you do. You got to look after yourself. No, and I think I do know what you mean. What you're saying to me is keep running. You're actually saying keep running, right?
Well, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, we're moving away a little bit, but in my experience, and I'll be 63 this year. Yes. Right? I know a lot of my friends who play competitive sport and did hard stuff in the early days physically are all without fail, and I've tried to take away, statistically this, that, and the other, and they're all better for it than the people who didn't.
Yes.
So, and let's face it, we as human beings, we're not designed to sit in these bloody chairs looking at screens all day. We are designed to walk around 15 to 20 Ks looking at the savannah, at animals that want to eat us and animals that we want to eat.
Yeah.
So,
100%.
Really important stuff.
It's been my great saviour, actually. My dad was a clever cookie, I'd say. He went on to do education and be a teacher and PE, and then he went on to sort of be in the fitness industry in the early days in the 80s and so forth. But from him, I think I got a love of running and sport generally.
Yeah.
And I was a sporty boy anyway, so that fit well. But running's been my great vice.
See, there's the nature bit.
Yeah.
You can't nurture, you know what I mean?
Totally. But it's been my mental health fitness, as a friend would say to me. He wants to refer to it as fitness rather than mental health because he wants to be something that's entrenched in your daily routine. This is Wayne Holdsworth, a dear friend. He lost his son to youth suicide. So he talks about the value of doing something that's good for your health. And, of course, nothing is better than sport where – not nothing, but certainly one of the great things is sport. And I know for myself, you know, if you're feeling a bit of a shitty day or whatever it is, I go out for a walk, go for a run, do whatever you can do. But in addition to that, as you say, as you get older, we do have to watch what we eat. And even for the environment, to sort of circle this back around.
Yeah, we'll be talking about the environment soon enough.
So I'm trying to help you now.
You're doing a damn
I've stopped digging my own little hole here. I'm just up to my waist. You know, something I loved about America is they have the calories. Now, the calories are not everything, right? So I don't want to overstate this. But I think it's instructive. I would like, and maybe I won't succeed in this. We'll find out with time. But I'd love for us to have the calories on everything that we buy too, because we know what we should be having as a calorie intake on average per person. Now, I don't want to put unnecessary pressure on anyone, but I want everyone to be healthy. You know, that might be a selfish thing, but I want them to be healthy for themselves. I do want them to feel good about themselves. And if they feel good about themselves and they're a different body shape too, that's great too. So it's not about body shape, but it is about wanting people to be healthy. Because I think we can have a serious conversation about we want people to have good health because we know if you have good health and good weight, then that's less likely to cause cancer and other poor health outcomes. We want to avoid those. And so one of the ways we can do that is also illustrating how much calories so people are aware. It's about educating them, because I know myself when I've been in the States and you look at a shake drink and suddenly it's like, wow, like that's the entire day's intake of calories, for example. But the other thing it does to bring back the environment, it talks to how much we're probably eating or drinking in excess. And we know that's the case. We know that we consume far more than we need. And that has impacts on the environment.
We do in the Western world.
Well, increasingly everywhere. Like, it's not quite everywhere, but everywhere you go these days, the world is increasingly, interconnected. There's not a country on earth I don't think I've been to that doesn't have a Mentos. What does that say about the world? You know what I mean? Or a Snickers, or a Mars, or a Hershey's bar.
Consumerism is the number one. Well, again, podcast number 8, capitalism, consumerism. Please explain. No, I see with the food side of things it's simple. If you really simplify it, it's energy in, energy out, right, in its essence.
Yes.
And then it depends on what you're doing. And I had this conversation with my mum just yesterday. I went to see her. And I said, remember the old shearers from years ago? Like when I was a kid, there were shearers and we had relatives and wiry old blokes, 70, and they were eating like steak and eggs or lamb chops and eggs for breakfast. They're having a massive morning tea and having lunch, because they're shearing all day, expending calories.
Yeah.
But if they were not shearing and they were sitting in an office going in front of a computer, they would balloon up, because that energy intake is not for someone in a sedentary job. So it depends on what you do, what you're eating, obviously, how much you eat, what you're doing, and then obviously that natural metabolic rate. Some people's metabolisms are faster.
Yeah.
But you're right, I think there's excess, and when you start looking at things that are thrown out and you start hearing about supermarkets throwing out stuff before the use by date because from an insurance perspective, it's more financial. This is pretty horrible stuff, regardless of the political party in power at the time.
I mean, we've all seen it, right? Combine overconsumption with waste, and we've all been to places where we're like, oh, this is embarrassing. Like there's so much food that's being sent to the kitchen. You know what I mean? What impact does that have on the environment? The answer is a massive one.
It does.
We've got more than enough food on planet Earth to feed everyone, yet that's not the case.
Absolutely.
So we know these things. So how can we help ourselves? How can we educate ourselves to make sure that we're not contributing to that problem? Because each one of the steps in that problem is massive, from whether it's fertilizers, chemicals, land degradation, and so on and so forth. Like the list it impacts everything we do, what we consume.
But you're talking about greed, aren't you? We're talking about greed here.
No, not just greed. I think we can just get carried away with it. Like,
I'm not talking about greed about food, but
right.
greed for stuff. Like
habit. It becomes habitual comfort. Like we comfort ourselves with food, right, all the time. So we can do it unknowingly. We can just, I'm the same. I'd have a cup of tea. I'd love to have a chocolate with a cup of tea. Even recently I was eating too much crap. And I've started, there's a balance, because you've got to have your little vices, and chocolate and tea were my two vices. Well, I've still got tea and occasionally a bit of chocolate. But truth is, I transitioned in Christmas where we've got this. I love Easter, so it's bad time for me because it's
dark chocolate or
milk chocolate.
Oh, the sweet one.
Yeah, the sweet one. And I love the little chocolate eggs, the Cadbury eggs. If they want to send me any, they won't.
Cadbury.
And I don't eat them. I eat them all anyway. Peppermint eggs, right? But of course, what they did to trick me into almost a year-long supply of just eating rubbish is they put these little baubles, we call them, the Christmas ones, and they're peppermint too. It's just a different shape.
Oh.
So now I'm eating chocolate from bloody Christmas all the way through to Easter into May.
Oh, wow.
They'll have a Thanksgiving star with peppermint in it, and I'll just be buggered for the year. So I've kicked the habit, because recently it grew to I was doing 2 packets a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Sounds like I was a 2-packet a day.
2 packet a day. I get home.
Wow.
I just get home, and because I work long days, but I'll get home, have a cup of tea, and they're in the freezer, these little packet of eggs, and I'll have a cup. I'll be watching some nonsense on YouTube that's just mind-numbing in a nice way. And there I am, before I go to bed.
Chocolate is one of those. I like dark chocolate. I don't like the milk chocolate. It's a bit too sweet for me. As a kid, I liked it, but but I like dark chocolate. But I can't say anything against eating chocolate. What I can say about chocolate is and this is the sobering part, is the how it's harvested and some of the issues around that from an environmental and a human perspective. When you're in the United Nations in Africa, and Africa's a huge place.
Yep.
It's a huge continent. Is this where all of this started to really coalesce? You obviously had an understanding of environmental issues before that, but is this where it really hit home to see? Not
so obviously, but I do think. Right. I fell in love with. In fact, I travelled before I moved to London. I actually travelled to. I did some backpacking across Africa for 2 months or something, and I just fell in love with it, adored it, and I wanted to volunteer and go back there in some capacity, any capacity, because, as you've said, you can't help but be in Africa and notice that everything has its place, and it sounds a little bit, Hakuna Matata, Lion King, but the words ring true, because certain animals eat certain grasses, and that impacts the ecology of other parts of Africa and so on and so forth. So you can't. It's writ large. It's in everything that's occurring there. So I was very, very fortunate to travel when I did, to see what I did when I saw it, and to take those lessons away. And as it turns out, I tried to get a volunteer job there and ended up being sent to Bangkok, to Thailand, and I struggled. I had no idea geographically where Thailand began and Vietnam or Cambodia or Malaysia. I had no idea. And so off I went and did a volunteer year for a human rights organisation based in Thailand, in Bangkok, but then travelling around the region, so Bangladesh and Vietnam and everywhere else, which I, to this day, has created one of the great loves of my life too, which is Thailand, which is a completely different culture and arguably far more important for Australia because of our locality. And, understanding that culture. And that year there, I made more mistakes culturally than you can tally on a board. And that was my education. I felt bad about that in a sense.
Buddhists are pretty forgiving, aren't they?
Thank goodness. Yeah. Otherwise,
was it you made
short
that
blank? No, not that bad. But when I look back at it, I just think you like to think you're volunteering to help them. Well, the truth is, I went to Thailand to help the Thai people. And by the time I left there, they were opening their first above-ground train station, finishing off the below-ground train line, opening their second international airport, and Melbourne's done none of those things. Yeah. Should we take a couple of calm down?
Cheers.
West. I won't tell you how many years it's been since I've lived there or lived there. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know that I helped them, but I helped enlighten myself, and culturally it was fascinating. And I love it. It's a love I still have, not just for Thailand, but for Southeast Asia, for China, for all these countries, and appreciating more where they come from and their perspective, which we repeatedly mess up in the West.
We do have an island mentality, yet we're a Western world. Politically, we are more like a Westminster system with a touch of Americanism in there.
Yes.
But we don't have a president, so we align more with the whole UK, yet where we are geographically is Oceania, with more connection to, say, Indonesia and Asia, hence you saw the Matildas play. We have this island mentality, which has held us in good stead and made us a desirable place, but at the same time has excluded a lot of us from a world view, whereas people who have travelled and lived, and like yourself, they have a wider view. They understand that connection, whereas I don't. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, but so many Australians travel too, so I don't quite.
Yeah, but travelling for holidays and travelling like work, I went to Thailand and I was 2 weeks in the resort and I never stepped out of there. Yeah, what a load of crap that is. Well, sorry for the people who are travelling to Thailand to stay in a resort for 2 weeks, because I'm sure they deserve it, but it's different from going there and immersing yourself in the culture.
Yes.
And working and try to understand the people, as opposed to, hey, my dollar goes a bit further in Bali.
Yes.
Because I can't afford to go to Paris.
Yeah. Or even understanding prejudices, right? I mean,
absolutely.
If I'm living in Africa in a town where I'm the only white guy, it never occurred to me, because I was very fortunate. I was raised, both my parents and their influences, they were not an ist of any kind. They were not bigoted, racist, sexist, whatever.
Right.
So I've considered myself to have been very lucky.
Very.
It's one of the great gifts, perhaps, that they gave me, that I just didn't care who or what people are other than be
that's
themselves.
fantastic.
So, but to your point, in Australia, I also grew up at a time, as you did, where our grandparents' immediate sort of reckoning was with the Japanese, and that, if anything, maybe pushed us in the war in a different direction than we were headed. And maybe it's taken us longer to re-engage with our neighbours than might have been the case. Maybe that's not true. I don't know, but it's. I remember my youth being, there was still a lot of, even in those days, there was a lot of anti-Japanese sentiment. I think that's moved away for my children's generation now. They don't hear that anymore, thank God.
They don't. No.
We've got
that was the older generations who, like my great uncles and my grandfather's brothers and stuff, they some were in Changi and this and that.
Well, my grandfather was a prisoner of war. In Malaysia, and my other grandfather was in Darwin when that was bombed. So they had that recent memory, but we've all moved, and we've got better connections and relationships with our part of the world. So our culture, further your point, I think our cultures continue to change and evolve, I think, in a brilliant way. Personally,
well, and all cultures take time to develop, and the thing is, again, what is the definition of a culture? People forget that there was a culture before we came, and that was, and still the most sustainable, class as the most sustainable culture, being the indigenous population. But if you delve in, and this is controversial, but if you even chat to some of the elders about, were they the first in Australia? Some will say, well, no, actually. But that's a podcast number 10. But it's interesting about the whole culture thing, and back that island mentality. We probably used it to our advantage, I suppose, but it's finding connection with the world. Unless you've gone out, you're insulated.
Yes.
And that has consequences, both good and bad, maybe. I don't know.
Certainly for our own sustainability, for Australia's role in the world, how we see ourselves. Like, for very long in politics, people would say, but we're only X% of the problem, therefore we should not lead the way. That's been an excuse. Certainly on my side of politics too. It's not a view I share. Like, I if anything, working and living overseas, it's taught me that the entire world is crying out for an example of best practice. It doesn't matter what that best practice is. It could be in medicine, it could be in education, it could be in the environment. And the world doesn't care whether it's a council, a state or country. They're crying out for the best example of someone doing something well.
Leading by example. Yeah.
And so we should never underestimate how influential Australia can be. And we've seen it again recently where, thanks to efforts like Wayne, the friend I talked about before with his son, Australia is leading the way still with banning children from having access to certain social media. Like, we've got to remember, we're the same country and same state that was the forefront of wearing seatbelts. So if we can do it in all these other areas, we can certainly do it with the environment as well, and we should be.
Yeah, I think, look, we're in the enviable position from a renewable energy perspective as being, like, we can be world leaders, and we are, and there's a lot of scrutiny in Australia what goes on, like in regards to our electrical infrastructure and energy storage now with the renewables. What's your view on the whole energy storage, the grid, fossil fuels, coal, the gas, the whole bit?
I think it's all upside. I'm excited by all of it. Like, I just think if people see it sensibly, I look for the common ground in everyone, right? What do people want? I think everyone wants clean air, clean soil, clean water. Like, that's the commonality.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the rest is the bullshit.
Correct.
So how do we get to have these things that are clean, therefore healthy, and that help create healthy lives? That's the commonality. So when I say it's exciting, there's huge space here in scope for entrepreneurialism, for enterprise, for new technologies to thrive in every regard. Like, I'm excited by some of the things I see that if we can change any existing technology that we're using and make it cleaner and better for us and the planet, where's the downside? Now, some of it will be staged. Some of it will take longer to get there than others.
Yes.
And that's because we're preserving maybe way of life, we're preserving our quality of life, or maybe it's just a question of ingenuity and how quickly we can get there. And you and I have seen this throughout our life with all different examples of exactly what we're talking about now. And then you've got to get scale, because scale is important to make something. It's got to be, we can't produce something that no one can afford, because how does that work? It takes. But then there are other occasions where we do need to lead from the front. So I think everything like, the concept that we can make, say, everyone's house energy independent. Who wouldn't agree with that? Like, how cool is that? Isn't that where we should be headed?
The people selling, I totally agree.
Yeah.
And it's not as if passive solar design is a new concept. It's been around for thousands and thousands of years, and it is quite possible to build a house with zero inputs from a heating and cooling perspective, with the correct combinations of thermal mass and insulation and all of those things. This has been done time and time again. The issue is that the market, when we're talking about housing, let's say, for example, that the market is driven by people's expectations of the house they buy not just being a place to live, but an investment, which was never really like that, say, 30, maybe 40 years ago. And that's why house prices have one of the reasons why they've grown tremendously. So people go, I wouldn't mind an energy efficient smaller house, but if I build that, I probably won't get maximum return in 5 years when I sell it. So let's buy the Neo-Georgian, no eaves, with the HVAC on top, throw on maybe some solar hot water to get a 8-star rating, which is bullshit, and then, hey, we won't lose money.
Yeah.
So it's about changing people's perceptions en masse. So they go, hey, we perceive these better built quality houses, which will reduce our outgoing expenses, as more desirable, and everyone thinks the same. So, hey, then you can still satisfy the investment perspective.
Totally. And then as we've touched on already, what are we building? Are we thinking about it? Do we heat map the house we're looking at? And of that heat map, how many rooms never get any heat at all because they're not used at all?
That's
so that has an environmental consequence.
Absolutely, it does.
Yeah, and if we want to go, we want to then talk about the mining consequences and the forestry consequences to this structure that we've now built that is not being used. I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? We want to. We don't want to be telling people what they're doing with their lives every step of the way, but we do want to be smart. And that's where we can agree. How do we get smart, and how do we actually either incentivize it, or, I mean, I don't think you have to convince anyone that having a house that's self-sustaining is a good idea. It's just a no-brainer. And people are gradually headed that way. So I think it's exciting. Then I'll get some, gravity batteries. I love the idea of some of these gravity batteries, whether it's, and some of them may never fly, right? But this is the exciting space we're now in terms of, could you have a sand-based gravity battery? Could you have a wheat-based? Could you have any other materials? Like, what could you use? How could we get cleaner and greener, and how could we rely less on the mining, the extractions industries.
It's a really good point. I'm a great fan of Flywheels. I don't know if you know much about them, but they've been around for a very long time, probably nearly 100 years, used in various ways. And now they with rare earth magnets and maglev technology, they're very efficient, but they still don't stack up on a cost per kilowatt hour basis to, say, lithium iron phosphate. But they're made of steel. You can make it recyclable. There's nothing that you don't have to mine. They last for 30 years, bugger all maintenance, the whole bit. But until the market will dictate, and unfortunately that's how it is. The market dictates, especially in renewables, what things are adopted. I will say one thing. When I studied all this many years ago, there was a great.
But the market doesn't always get it right either, does it?
Totally.
As you and I know.
And people have to remember the market is not some amorphous celestial being. It's right. People and their psychological drivers. And you're right, the market doesn't get it right a lot of the times. But when I first started all this stuff, there was a great discussion about consuming less. And that argument and that discussion hardly occurs at all, because you make bugger all money out of people using less of anything. And that's a really hard one for me personally. I've sort of taken my Greenwood hat off a little bit here. But it's true. It's
like the food consumption. We're talking about the same thing now, right?
Yeah.
It's what we surround ourselves in, what we put ourselves in, what we put it into ourselves. It's all those things. We've created a society that sells. And so that keeps the economy going. And so that's where we're on a treadmill. And if we stop, then what happens? Do we fall flat?
We don't. Well, that's the thing. We ooh.
I don't think we do. No, that is the answer. Of course we don't fall flat.
No, of course we don't. And
we adjust.
We adjust, and we're agile, and human beings are quite resilient. And so I just think we have to be more aware of what goes on. We have to be really aware that there's this interconnection between all things, like that concept of ecology, interdependence between all living things. You go one step, it's the interconnection between all things. Some connections are more powerful and directly related than others, but just to remember that hey, just because you got a more energy efficient house or whatever, or you put solar on and you negate that by going out and buy a bigger air conditioner, you see what I mean?
Totally. I mean, you have a really energy efficient house and you've got one person living in it.
Oh.
And it could be, as you say, cost neutral. But the truth is, well, what about all the extraction and the forestry?
That's exactly right.
Everything has a consequence.
It does. And families are getting smaller too, by the way. So
yeah, not my fault. I'm doing my work.
You are. Yeah, you definitely are.
It must be something in the water.
Well, it's
not PFAS, by the way.
No.
Well, is it?
Is that on that subject? Is that something you had quite a bit of a conversation being
totally
with the fire service? Yeah, because that
was
the
fire services, the foams they've used, but also all of us. We're behind the eight ball when it comes to cracking down and understanding and tackling, and we're poisoning ourselves, all of us, every single day. It's awful. Even some of the coffee cups and stuff. I mean, we start to think about it and look into it, and this should be a priority for governments. It could be the next. It could be much worse than asbestos, and that's the truth. And yet we're doing it to ourselves, our children, everything. It's horrific.
The problem always is that stuff has this time stamp, doesn't it? Like with asbestos, there would have been people back in the day going, yeah, we know this is pretty shit, but whatever. And we know that not everyone's going to be affected because, some people are more susceptible than others, blah, blah, blah. And we'll do our cost optimization calculations, go, if that happens, we'll work, whatever. And this is what happens.
Yeah.
And
DuPont knew. DuPont knew what they were doing. It's well documented, their behaviour overseas. Awful. And yet we've allowed that to continue. We've sanctioned it in many ways. And we still do that. So that'll be interesting if I get the chance to tackle some of that.
Coming up to this political process at the end of the year, I'm a little bit unclear. You're moving away from those two particular portfolios. Is that right? Is that the right expression?
Moving away from them?
Yeah, as in you said, Shadow Minister for Environment, it's going to someone else, you said. Is that right?
No,
I don't understand.
No,
sorry.
that's okay.
Let's cut that bit out.
I must have missed the news release. Geez, that was short-lived. If we were to, if my side, if my tribe, and I'm trying to be less tribalistic,
no, okay.
If we're successful, then I would be the Minister for the Environment and the Minister for Fire Rescue Victoria. If we're not successful, then I will either be in the Parliament and I don't know what my future
But you'll still
holds.
be the shadow. Let's say, worst case scenario, you'll be the shadow.
No, worst case scenario, I won't be re-elected myself, and I won't even be in the Parliament.
That's where my confusion. That's my confusion.
That's probably where you picked up on.
And you're
because I'm making an attempt to go to the lower house as distinct from the upper house, and the seat that I'm contesting in the lower house is currently held by another tribe to the order of 7.5%, which in political speak means Everest with a little bit of oxygen, maybe none. So it's a difficult climb.
What is that seat?
Ringwood.
And that is...
It's swung in, over the course of history, it has swung both ways, both Liberal and Labor, both tribes. So I have to be optimistic and confident. That's my disposition anyway. And I hope that's what happens. And I'm certainly doing everything I can to win the trust of enough locals that support the work I do locally and hope that they invest that decision in me to continue to do what I do locally, much less anything else.
I really like Ringwood Lake. It's
gorgeous. It's beautiful. We've got Blackie Lake, we've got Ringwood Lake, we've got a number of reserves.
Blackburn Lake, yeah. No, we went there because we live in the Dandenong Ranges, but we went to Ringwood. Daughter wanted to go to the shopping centre with a friend, so we walked the dog around, and I hadn't been to Ringwood Lake for a long time. It's fantastic.
Mullen. We've got it's a really beautiful. The area covers from Blackburn all the way to Ringwood East, and in between Nunawading, Mitcham, Heatherdale, Heathmont, and little bits of Vermont, Forest Hill, and Donvale.
That's a fair whack of people, isn't it?
Yes, and it's quite dense. I mean, it's quite in terms of the size. It's not the largest electorate, but it's gorgeous. It's such a there are great differences, great variations, beautiful natural aspects there as well. And we're not, we've got enough nature reserves and creeks that there's plenty to do in the environment in that space.
So when people talk to you, is what's their, I mean, this is a hard question. What's their main concern from an environmental perspective that you've heard time and time again? Or
it's a good point. People will say climate change. But then you've got to unpack that, right?
What does that mean?
What does that mean?
Yeah.
And is it something, back in my day when I was younger, it was so much easier because they might say the ozone layer, but then there'd also be other issues. And I talked to kids about this recently too. I said we've touched on it a little bit, it wasn't just the Amazon and other things I was concerned about. I was also concerned about nuclear testing by the French at Mururoa Atoll. See, you still remember that name?
Yeah.
Things like that were etched on our consciousness.
Absolutely.
There's this government coming from afar to test their weapons. Now, of course, we used to let that happen all the time with the British.
Woomera, Rocket Range, all that area in South Australia.
So past generations don't even have a consciousness of that. Or Greenpeace and the role they played, and then we had the great dam debates as well. And it's I suppose it's unique to your time and place, but it's what do people talk about? They are concerned about the environment more broadly. And it gets down to this, there's a myriad of issues, whether it be just the people concerned by things like PFAS, people concerned with things like the quality of our water, the protection of our native species, both flora and fauna, invasive species. We've got a massive deer problem at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
It's just out of control.
Come up to the Dandenong Ranges, they're everywhere. Big samba, they're huge.
Yeah. It's a pest.
They wreck.
They're wreckers, right? And
you know how they wreck the bush mostly? Well, one of the ways is when they're in velvet and they need to rub the velvet off their antlers. They're going to those saplings and they're rubbing. If people watch it, there you go, rubbing like that, and that rings barks the trees.
And I don't think most Victorians they may not have even heard about the problem, although presumably by now they have. I think we had a deer running down the streets of, was it Coburg or Carlton recently?
Wow.
It was just next level, but it's a pest. It's an absolute pest, and if we keep letting it run rife, we're doing enormous damage to the rest of the ecosystem and other animals as well. So
it's funny, isn't it, though? With the feral animals, if they're like pigs, it's like, those dirty pigs, but they're deer. Oh, they're majestic. I can talk about, I love fishing, rainbow trout and brown trout. They are a feral pest. They've displaced a lot of Australian natives over the years. Carp is the classic environmental disaster.
Yes.
Won't even talk about cane toads. They buggered that one up, didn't they?
Yeah, the list goes on.
The list goes on. But the thing is, it's no good cry over spilt milk, is it?
No.
I mean, that's the thing. You have to.
We've got to look for the solutions.
We've got to look for the solution.
And we've got to look for some quick wins, because the quick wins helps build trust and prove to people why it's important we're doing what we're doing. So whether it's even some of the, the poisons that we put in some of the things we're now killing mice and rats with. Back in our day, it was a rat or mouse trap.
Yes.
And it was the most...
The rat traps are the big ones.
Yeah, it was a pretty ecologically, environmentally sustainable and
Totally.
safe means to do. But now we're putting all these very sinister drugs, and it's going right through the chain of life, and it will enter into our system. There's no two ways about that. They've seen similar things in Africa with vultures, where they were baiting certain animals and it found its way into the ecosystem. So we do need to have some quick gains. We do need to actually start to both educate but also share the victories when we have them, so people understand the value of them.
What do you think is a good, most applicable quick gain that's achievable? Like
in the environment space?
Yeah. I know, it's a hard question, I know. But
look, I
think you can take that. You can take.
Well, I think they've started to do. I mean,
Yeah.
Bunnings has already said in terms of some of the chemicals they have in some of the rat baits and poisons, they're going to take them off the shelf I think it's due in the middle of next year. Well, I'd urge them to do it now. Like, don't wait. Get them out of, we know it's doing immense damage to a powerful owl, for example.
Oh, correct.
Because we know from the powerful owls we've recovered that there's evidence that they've ingested some of this stuff. So, it has these very negative. So we can do that immediately. We've got to take more attention to what's happening in our. It's like, when those. It's another example, but when the bench tops came out, and it's like the new.
Oh yeah,
the silica.
that's silicosis. Yes,
everyone saw it coming a mile away. Why do we do nothing about it? Governments have a lot to answer for, plural. And we're seeing a plethora of that in our society at the moment. Scooters. Why are we? Do we want to look after the welfare of our children, or don't we? Because we're making them wear a helmet if they've got a bike, but when it comes to scooters, they're basically motorised machines. They're basically motorbikes.
They banned them in, I think, Queensland if you're over 12.
If I had my way, I'd ban anything under 16. Ban them.
They're so bloody unstable, aren't they? Because you're standing up. They're stupid.
These kids are killing themselves. Once you're 16, get your learners, then you can have your scooter, no problem. But yeah, start to. I don't want to overreach, because Aussies don't like that, Victorians don't like it, and this is BS and the rest of it. But you know what? I don't want young boys and girls killing themselves on a bloody scooter that's motorised. It's not the scooter we had when we were growing up, and that doesn't mean that they can't be adapted. But at least know the road laws, know how to look after yourself, because otherwise we're just letting it rip, and I'm not sure that is not a solution.
There is some quick wins, like you straight away if they said, well, this is the new legislation, you're not allowed to do this. And I'll give an example. I was listening to the ABC the other day, and they were talking about Chapel Street. Yep. And Chapel Street had a lot of trouble with a lot of people staying away because of the violence, drugs, crime, etc. Then they started increasing the police presence, and they reckon there's been, in the last couple of months, a huge increase in people going back to that place, shopping, and they've made an extra, I think it was 30 million or whatever the figure was. And that was the simple thing, like, because people are going to react. If you're doing something naughty and you see the police, well, you're less likely to do it. And for someone who's not doing something naughty, oh, great, I feel a bit better about it. A simple fix.
But guess what's happening? To do that, they're taking it off train stations. So 120 stations they're no longer based at. And guess what's happening? Guess what's happening at the train stations? The crime level's gone up.
Oh, no. So coming down here and, right.
We're robbing Peter to pay Paul again. And we haven't learnt from the 80s and 90s when it was a disaster. No one wanted to use the public transport system, which then undermines the entire system and has poor outcomes for the environment when people don't use the transport network. And then with silly things like we're building train stations that don't have a public toilet. Ringwood East is a classic where the government have literally spent billions on 2-level crossing removals, which were associated with the works, and a train station, brand new. And there's not one public toilet.
Oh, no one needs to go to the toilet.
That's right.
That's ridiculous to me as a member of the public. That's ridiculous.
Because it's not defined, because no one at the government's response is, and this has been for plural governments, right? Yeah. This nonsense pervades. That, it's not staff, therefore it's not safe. It's like, hang on. Not safe is not having a toilet at all, and then being forced to go up the back blocks of the local IGA to go to the toilet, where there is a toilet, which is completely unsafe, versus here at a train station, whether it's a staff member or not, You've got umpteen CCTV. You've got PSOs, or you used to until you took them off. What's unsafe about this? This is just insane. And over and above the fact that, if we're going to have, it's about accessibility. It is about inclusion in the best sense of the word. That is, we want the elderly to be able to use their transport system. We want people who are disabled or have ability constraints to be able to use the transport system. You want mothers who are pregnant, parents, guardians with small children. What's the alternative? Sorry, sweetheart, just take a piss over there. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, this is just...
Wow.
Yet we're 2026 and it's not the policy of this government. When you build a brand new train station, for goodness sake, build one toilet. We don't have to have male, female, we can have one. It should be an all abilities toilet. That's all. You can wait. People can wait, there's the toilet. At least you have the certainty of knowing if you get there, you can use the toilet.
I'm gobsmacked. I didn't realise.
Yeah.
Jeez.
That's another thing I'd change straight away.
So back to the environment side. I mean, as we've worked out, everything is connected.
Yes.
The toilet thing, that's just bloody ridiculous. Who with the right mind? No. We'll maybe talk about that off camera. That's ridiculous. But from an environmental perspective, you mentioned about the PFAS. And can you explain to people what, because I've heard this.
They're forever chemicals, basically, and we're using them increasingly in non-stick surfaces. But the surfaces,
Teflon.
Correct.
Oh.
Correct. And so they're continuing, and there's so many iterations. There's something like 10,000 iterations of this one chemical now, and it's finding its way into our systems, and it's with certain elevated levels. Some of them have been found in coffee cups as well. Like what we're doing is we're slowly poisoning ourselves, and our children for that matter. And unless we start to take it seriously and take a good look at this, then the health outcomes, forget the environment around us, let's talk about ourselves for a second. We will do a very good job at giving future generations cancers and other health defects that are either untreatable or inevitable at a much earlier age. And at some point, we may actually see the reverse of what we've seen over civilization, that is longer lifespans, and we might start getting
less and less.
Yeah, good job, eh?
Shitty job. And that doesn't even mention about the microplastic side of things, which is I mean, we've already got it through us in our brains and everything they say. It's but I hate hearing that argument where it's too late, we've already got it.
It's never too late.
Yeah, people should complain more about these things, but I think Australians, they don't tend to complain. They're more like they'll complain maybe internally.
I think Australians also have a great sense of like if you propose a good idea and it makes sense, they're quite adaptive. They're open to being pro-environment. They've shown that time and again.
Yeah.
I think it's politicians who've let Australians down and Victorians down who just haven't been as adventurous or as inventive. In fact, I think if anything in the environment space, and I say this when I meet groups, I think sadly the environment space and discussions have been increasingly captivated by the left in this country. Not blaming the left or the right, both are to blame in truth, and in allowing them to captivate. Instead of going back to the basics, which we talked about at the very beginning, that is, what do we want?
Yeah.
We want clean soil, air, and water. Then we've seceded the ground. It's like having a footy match but saying our team's going to sit on the bench. Well, you're never going to win. There's plenty for people like myself to talk about in terms of being innovators and entrepreneurs and all the things that appeal to our interpretation of it. We've got stuck over these. We've had these real or imagined targets, and everyone's got stuck in. But they're signed up to this or signed up to that. Since when is having a target a bad thing? It's. I have goals myself.
Yeah, of course you have to.
I want to do this today. I want to do this week. I want to do this year. We don't have targets. Not having any endpoint or any sort of ambition.
Yes.
And again, I'd argue that is a very silly position to be.
Well, human beings are goal seeking.
And then there's the flip side of that, right? If you have the ambition and it's just platitudes, which is where we've sort of got in the environment space, not entirely. It must be said, not entirely. More often than not, it's been used as a signal to the market to invest or do something, which is. That's fine in and of itself, but there's so much more we can do behaviourally, and we've got so much more control over the levers because we are that isolated island that we should and could be setting the example to the rest of the world. So, for me, it is an incredibly exciting space. There's no part of this space we shouldn't be leading by example and starting to clean up the mess we've got. We should have a zero landfill goal. Why shouldn't we? And, that's bullshit. You'll never get it down to zero. No, but let's work toward that, because if we're working toward that as a goal, will do much better than saying we should have 20%, because then we'll forget about the 20%. It'll all get too hard. Like, why shouldn't we be ambitious for the environment? Why
the goal should be an absolute goal. The reality is,
we may never achieve it.
Yeah, but at least
I'm comfortable with that.
That's
but at
a
least
really good.
I've got
That's
a mindset
a really
that
good
says
point.
everything we use and consume, how can we make sure that we're not doing a damage to the environment every time we do that? And some stuff we will bury, and other stuff hopefully we don't. But hopefully we whittle that down to its bare minimum at some point, as every generation has. You know, we just need to give ourselves license and permission to be adventurous and smart about that.
Gosh.
And you got to have passion for it, right? This is the problem. If you have governments that get old and you have ministers that are not passionate necessarily, and I'm not casting any aspersions upon anyone, but it's true of any portfolio. It could be health, education, business, transport, AI. If you've got somebody who's passionate about something versus somebody who's just going through the motions. I say about politics, you have two sorts of ministers in government. Doesn't matter what your politics is. You have the minister that's run by the department and the minister that runs their department.
Right. Wow.
The latter is very, very few and far between.
Sorry, when you said that, for some reason I saw, that old English program, Yes Minister, and wow, that makes perfect sense to me. And
yep.
I think, look, I've never met another politician, and I
never,
not knowingly, not as in g'day, shake their hand. Maybe they've passed me in the street. But if they're as half as honest and forthright and passionate as you, look, I think you're going to do really well. Hey, if I was, honestly...
If saying it makes it so,
I'll
then
tell you,
that be the case.
If I was living in Ringwood after, I'd be...
You've got 7 months. What are you doing?
No, we're not moving for a while. We've been there nearly 13 years. We love it up there.
It's a beautiful spot.
It is a beautiful spot. But no, I'd definitely vote for you after talking to you, because you've changed my views. Like I'll say it out, and I've voted Greens for the last few years because of what I believe to be their particular approach from an environmental. But that was based on effectively what you've talked about from that top-down scenario. So now I'm looking at it completely differently, because it makes so much sense the way. So on the next...
And you might have a Green that is a...
I don't know who I have to check the person who's coming up now. But I was just, buggered. I sometimes vote like, I don't want those people in power, I don't want these people in power, as opposed to who I want in power. And I think a lot of people do that. And I'm not a stupid person, so... I'm really thinking about what you said before, really thinking about it.
And you get a lot of good people on both sides. That is the truth, right?
Yeah.
On both sides. I deal all the time with Greens, Labor, One Nation, and other parties, Animal Justice. Georgie Purcell, who, she does an amazing job on behalf of animals, full stop, one member of Parliament.
Right.
And she's prosecuting the rights of animals and wildlife and the environment every day. So, that's an example of someone that, in this job, the smart people get on with other people. We can have robust differences and we can tackle a problem from different angles.
But there's respect.
Not only respect, to hell with respect, right? You don't have to respect someone you work with, but you've got to understand that working with somebody and finding that common ground for a proper solution or an outcome that's positive, that's great. You don't have to respect them to get the outcome. You just got to realise that they're the cards we're dealt. And this is true of politics, right? Because in politics, they're elected. You're working with them. It's the same with your own team. It's the same with those opposite. They've got the cards they've been dealt. So how do we work with each other to get the best outcome?
On that note, I think that was a great way to end the podcast. It's been, and I know I say this a bit, but it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I've learnt so much personally, and I think just the way you've been so articulate on your views and how you see the world, and I think it'll really resonate with a lot of people. Thanks, mate.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Cheers.